So I wanted to make a video and reflect on all the books that I read throughout 2025. I've never done this before, but to me it felt like it was a good idea considering, like honestly, I had to think about all the books, like exactly what books I even read this year, and unlike movies where I have like Letterboxd that kind of tracks everything, books I kind of have to just remember. But so in order to have like a way for me to go back and see, these are the books I read during this time, I decided this would be a good idea, and also just communicate some of my thoughts. So this is like a rough order when I read them, and I'm gonna get through the like the just boring normal books first, and then I'm gonna do comics. I have a couple of comic graphic novels that I read this year too. So the first book I read was this Tao Te Ching, the Book of the Way, with Chinese philosophy or lessons written by Laozi, who's basically like the founder of Taoism. Um, the whole yin and yang religion and spiritual belief in China, and yeah, the book is very short. It's like how much? Let me even see. Um, so the thing is, it's like I read it in probably like 3 days. It's 81 pages, and they're not actual pages. They're just kind of like verses. It's almost like 81 tiny little poems. So you can read through that really quickly. But even though this book is very simple, and I'm happy that it's very short, because for this sort of message, like about balance and about, just being very resilient, like not resilient, but just disconnecting yourself from indulgence and being just at peace. For it to be like a big, huge book, just going on and on, would kind of be like a little bit tonally inconsistent, I feel like. But this book definitely came to me in a good place because while I still believe in a lot of the stuff, like, the importance of hard work and discipline, and all these things, I was definitely going down a little bit of a not really self-destructive, but it was almost like exhausting path of just nonstop trying to achieve things, but not being able to because of school and stuff like that, and just stressing myself out. This book definitely helped me like understand, like, I still value all these things, but they won't even happen if I don't have this sort of positive, mindset and an ability to disconnect from stress and just relax and be at peace. So if you are interested in this sort of philosophy, this is like the most important book out there, because it's really just what defined it, and it's very easy to read. You'll just breeze through it. So, second book is another sort of philosophy, except very on the other sort of opposite spectrum, and that is The Stranger by Camus. Also, I forgot there are going to be some books that I'm not going to have, and I'm going to separate them all into one cluster because they're all books that I read at school. So anyway, The Stranger by Camus. Basically, this is like philosophy, except it's communicated through a story. And the way that I would describe it is, it's like if you compare it to other novels, like stories, it's not that interesting because the story is very simple. There's no character, like there's characters, but they're very empty, very devoid of real personality. But if you compare it to like just straight philosophy, like the next book I'm going to talk about, this is actually an interesting alternative, and I think it's a good way to get into a philosophy is by kind of identifying with real storyline and characters, and it does a good job of that. Basically, it's like the I thought at first that Camus was an absurdist, and I guess that's what he's called. But I would say this book was quite depressing and like nihilistic, basically kind of saying that life, is not mean. I don't know if like it's right to just call it life is meaningless, but basically it's a pretty bleak look at human psychology and just how like whatever you do, it doesn't really matter. The world is just kind of a place with no substantial meaning, and morals are just not that important to this character. This character is basically like the definition of just a sociopath. Like he's a normal, everyday kind of guy, but he has no relationship, no connection with anything, no emotions, and it really throws you into the perspective. So very similar to another book of this era that I read at school called The Metamorphosis by Kafka. Very similar because they're both short. They're both not very difficult to read. Language is pretty simple, and they both kind of like to me left me feeling very cold and empty inside. And they're not books that I ever really want to reread because of that, but they are very interesting and effective sort of ways to sort of learn about this philosophy. Even though I'm personally just not a fan of it, it's an important part of like if you want to be more confident in your own philosophy, it's important to know the other philosophies. So I would recommend this, though I don't think it's like the most amazing book because I don't think the story's amazing. I don't think the language is great, but it's an interesting sort of way of describing a very important philosophy. So, and obviously Camus is a brilliant guy. Next is another philosophy book. This is Epictetus Discourses. This book is kind of long, actually. Those first two books are very short. This one, it's not super long. It's actually only like 200 something pages, but it's a tough read because it's just philosophy, just straight kind of, what's the word? Just like lessons, and there's no plot or anything like that. It's just verses of lessons and ideas. So the way I got into Stoicism was in freshman year, actually, like a couple years back. My grandpa, here I have it with me. I just gotta take it out. My grandpa got me Meditations by Aurelius. Here I have it over here, and that book, legit, one of the most important books of my life because it came at a place where I was just at my worst as far as emotional, just lack of control. But he really changed my sort of like. He didn't exactly change my opinion, but he made me realize about a lot of things that I was doing wrong and just kind of set me on track. And I would say that's why I was interested in reading this book. This is a much deeper lens. I'd say if you want to get into Stoicism, meditation is a good way to start. But this is a lot more deeper. It's a lot more clear, and it's more connected to real world because there's a lot of parts where Epictetus describes things around him, such as the thinkers of the time, the academia, the Epicureans, who are kind of the opposite philosophy. So that's interesting. I don't really have that much to say about this book other than it's important, and it's like a very I don't agree with everything. There's definitely stuff in here where I start thinking like this is like stoicism to an extreme, unlike meditations where to me it feels a little bit more like tamer. This is like Epictetus himself just was kind of like he just lived in the wilderness basically. He didn't really have anything, he didn't own anything, he didn't attach himself to anything, which is not what I think is like the point of existence. However, I do agree with a lot of his lessons about detachment, about not caring about insignificant things like the worldly things, and it's definitely like a good way for me to like it was a good way, even though I would say I was already following a lot of those lessons, it was a good way for me to sort of think about them in a deeper way. So now we get something completely opposite, and something that was actually really fun to read. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I only read the first one, even though I have all 5 in this collection. To be honest, this book was fun, and it was enjoyable, and I really, just like the world. I like the characters. I like some of the humorous parts of it. But I don't know. I read it for a second time because the first time I read it, I was in middle school, and I kind of like it was one of those books where my mind was off while I read it. So I didn't really process anything. I definitely did like it, but I feel like I need to read it again in order, which is weird to say because it's like such a fun kind of basic book, but a lot of the for me to really just fall in love with it, I haven't really been able to do that yet. So, but it is definitely like classic enjoyable sci-fi. So next is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This was not the most important book I've read this year, but it's like it has like some relevance to my life just because I wrote my high school essay on this book. Or actually specifically on Nicholson's performance in the movie, and compared it to the book. So in order to really understand how good his performance was in the movie, which I had already seen, I needed to read the book. And I gotta say, well, the movie adaptation was amazing for sure. I haven't really changed my mind on that. I feel like it was almost as perfect as you can get. Change certain things, yes, but in a way that would fit for a cinematic experience. And I think Jack Nicholson specifically is just perfect. Like when I read the book and I read McMurphy's character, I was like, that's just Jack. Like I like it. It's just like he captures him so perfectly, and it's a difficult character really to capture because he's like such a complicated guy. You kind of have to balance out this anti-hero type, but still make him the hero to the audience. But yeah, the book, it's great. It's really amazing. This is just amazing story that's just so powerful and impactful in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, I don't really have that much to say about it. It's just watch the movie, but read the book. Honestly, I think if you're a fan of the movie, this is a great. It's great in its own way. It's not like it just gets replaced by the movie. There's a lot of detail in this and a lot of depth, and you also get a lot more from the Indian character's perspective, the big guy. and that's also an interesting sort of angle they look like. A lot of the stuff that the movie covers, this book really like gets into, and sort of the psychology behind it. So yeah, great book. Next was yeah, I think I'm almost done. I don't think there's that many more. Oh yeah, so next one is two books in one actually, which were Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes books. This one is A Study in Scarlet and The Hounds of Baskerville, and these are little cool, nice editions I got from my grandma. There's like images in there. Here, let me find one. Like, there's something like this. It's pretty cool. Uh, yeah, first time ever reading really any detective novel. And I'd say it's honestly pretty interesting. A Study in Scarlet's the first one. Obviously, that was like the meeting between Sherlock Holmes and Watson. And I'd say like I was into it a lot in the first half. I was like, this is great. This is just really pure interesting mystery. Second half threw me off completely because it just went into this whole things with Mormons in Utah, and I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, what's the point of any of this to the story? And the way they tie it up, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's great the way they tie it up. But I did think about it, like, was this worth it or is it not? Like, was it worth reading all this stuff for the twist? I think overall I'd say yes because it was such a great twist. But honestly, like, I think if you're starting out with a Sherlock Holmes book, maybe don't start with that one because it's like there's definitely a little bit of a twist. A lot of it is just not detective. It's just background. Hounds of Baskerville is a lot more traditional detective. It's great. There's really not that much I have to say about it. It's an interesting, like, again, Sherlock Holmes is not that in it that much, but I think that's part of the appeal is like his character just always has mystery to me. By the end of both of these books, I'm like, there's still so much about him that I don't know, which is great. But yeah, it's classic detective mysteries. I'm not gonna pretend that it's like my favorite genre now, but definitely had a good time reading it. But I would like to read Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, which I think is like a collection of little stories. I think that would be pretty interesting, and just like maybe get me a little bit more into the character. And then for my final book that I have here, novel, is Charles Dickens, but it's not all four books. We have like what is it? Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations, Christmas Carol, to Oliver Twist, and I only read A Christmas Carol right around Christmas. I was just thinking about. I saw this book on my shelf because my mom got it for me like a couple of months ago, and I was like, man, A Christmas Carol. It's like right around Christmas. I was just studying as usual. Like these past couple Christmases have just felt bleak because of just focus on work and not really about the spirit. And I was like, I haven't been watching any movies, anything like that. So I was like, I'm just gonna read this book. And honestly, like I knew the story. I feel like everybody knows the story. It's one of those like Romeo and Juliet type of stories where it's like you haven't even read the book, but you know the story of Scrooge and the three ghosts. But I still was blown away by how much I love this book. Like this was just, it's just wonderful. I don't even know how to describe it. Like it's simple, yeah, but it's just it's like so timeless. It's like basically a Christian story, really. It's like a very simple story about greed, about love, about family, about the Christmas spirit, and the real Christian aspect of the holiday. Even though he doesn't get into the religious aspect that much, like that's what Christmas is about. It stems from these religious values. And first of all, I loved Dickens's writing in here. I never read Dickens before. It was my first time reading Dickens, and I was always like, heard things that he's really difficult to read, and maybe he will be because Christmas Carol is very short and easy. But man, I just love how detailed he is. I love like the way he describes things. It's just beautiful. It's almost like imaginative, and a lot of times I don't like when writers just keep on and just talking nonsense. But with him, it's like he's almost like he's so good at it that it doesn't matter. You just want to hear him describe like food on the table. It's like it's great. But the story itself is amazing and simple, iconic. Everyone knows it, but it still hit me very hard. So then there were a couple of books I read for school, which I don't have. First one was a small little novella called Chronicle of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who is a Colombian author, and I've heard of him before because of 100 Years of Solitude, I think it was called. That one's really famous, but I never heard of Chronicle. But I liked it. It's like a little murder mystery kind of thing. But it's a lot deeper. It's not actually about the mystery because we know who did it. Uh, it's more so about like why and what exactly happened. And there's these magical realism things in it. What Marquez is kind of known for, which is really cool. I think this is a good way for me to read a little bit of Marquez because it's not it like I'd be surprised if it's his best book, but he already like just made a good impression on me in terms of just his ability to incorporate these unique elements into the story, like the fantastical stuff. So it was a cool book. The next book I read, it was probably one of my favorites of the year, was for school, was Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, and it's the story of African colony Nigeria, or not actually it's a tribe that becomes a colony. And man, I was like, this was my brother's favorite book, and I had meaning to read it in years, and I was like, wow, we're reading it in literature. Like, this is great. I get to just read it without actually having to go out of my way to do it. And man, it was great. I mean, I think this was kind of a surprise to me because of, a lot of the times growing up in Ann Arbor, very liberal city and very liberal education, uh, which, nothing really against that, but it's just that, like, I've heard this colonialism story a lot of different times before. And this book just did such a great job of giving it like a new angle and really like getting into it, not feeling preachy, but actually just feeling real. Like, this is definitely like a very anti-colonialist book, but the way they show it, it's like you're in the story. It's actually the story that matters. It's not just a message, about colonialism. It's about the characters. It's about Okonkwo, who is this huge asshole main character. It's like he's the anti-hero. He's like a totally terrible person, but you're kind of rooting for him because of the situation. And it's really just interesting, good storytelling, great writing too. I think it was written originally in English, and it's not very complicated. It's very simple to the point, but it feels descriptive too. And yeah, I would highly recommend everyone read that, even if you're, someone who's like, I don't want these sort of political messages in my books. It's just a great book. It doesn't matter. And then the last one was Death of a Salesman, which I read recently, but I actually read that one not for school. I read it on my own, and we're reading it in school right now. But conveniently, I don't have it because I gave it to my friend to read. But yeah, that book, the only play I actually read all year, and really, really, really great, amazing play. I hope to see it live someday. I don't really know. I mean, I think it kind of made me realize how much I enjoy reading plays, because I think maybe it's because I love movies, but the dialogue stuff for me is always really easy to get into. It's like I'm always hooked. I read the book really quickly, and I think it's like a lot of people see it as like this anti-capitalist sort of book, and I'm not saying it's not a pro-capitalist book, that's for sure, but it's I don't think it's that simple. I think the book is more so just an exploration of people in a capitalist system. Arthur Miller, like, I don't know much about him, but I do know that I think he himself said that the book is not really about capitalism. It's more so just about the way, this character like Willie is living in capitalism and kind of creating himself illusions. It's about like illusions and just forcing yourself to try to be something that you're just not, and ending up failing just because of that. He's a really complicated, interesting character, great to read, has really good writing. The whole book is just amazingly written and very, very, satisfying to read, especially the ending. The ending is amazing with Biff's realization. I think that was all just really powerfully done, and it just conveys a really strong message. So that's all for the big books. Now I just have some comics that I'm going to talk about very quickly. So first one was Superman Birthright. First time ever reading a Superman comic, and I was like, because of the movie, it was coming out this year, which I liked. And I wanted to like actually get to know Superman, because it's like his character feels so disrespected by a lot of like modern media, um, but I really I really got to understand what his appeal is. Like, he's a character that's hard to get down perfectly, because he's not like Batman, who is just interesting right away. Like, it's just, I mean, this cool billionaire in the cave and whatever, he just fights crime. Uh, he's more like, at this point, he's basically become ubiquitous with good, and it's just like, this boring sort of knight character. Like, we just can do so much more interesting. But the thing is, there's a lot of interesting possibilities with this character, and I like Birthright. It's not the best that I've read so far. Not as good as the second one. I've only read two, but it was a good introduction of his origin story and all that. Really enjoyed it. For All Seasons was another Superman comic I read. This one has a kind of cool, unique art style. Um, yeah, it's a little different. Superman looks kind of stupid. But I really enjoyed this one. This one was just more of what I liked about the Birthright, but to me it felt a little bit more emotionally like compelling. I think Superman's character was done better, but do need to reread this, and I do need to read All-Star Superman, which I bought, I think, this year, but I haven't read it yet. And then for Batman, I got The Long Halloween and Dark Victory. Both great. Long Halloween was amazing. I was just like, wow, this is an amazing graphic novel. And I read year one, and I like year one a lot, but Long Halloween, in my opinion, is even better. I think um, this was just so exciting to read. You can see the Dark Knight influence. If you like the Dark Knight, definitely read this book because a lot of the best things about the Dark Knight are in this book, and it's almost like they were expanded on more. And there's just so much atmosphere, so much great mystery, great characters, Two Face, Batman, everything. It's so good. And then finally, I have Calvin and Hobbes. My first time really reading them. I read them quite a bit before going to bed. This is very like nothing. Like I didn't get one of those big collections because they cost so much money, but just got a little taste. And man, they're just really fun, comforting books. I think like considering they're for kids, there's a lot of like really clever messages in them about like just random allusions. Like it just comes out of nowhere, but it's like so well done because it's for kids and they can't make it like pretentious and annoying. They just like kind of hint it in, and it's really fun. It's creative and just enjoyable. Like this is the type of stuff that I like to sometimes read after like reading like a Camus and all this depressing stuff, and I'm like, ugh, I'm just sick of it sometimes. And it's nice to read like just really creative, fun comics that are also kind of clever. So yeah, that's what I read this year. If I were to recommend some books, if you're a comic book fan, just read this. There's no question about that, and read Calvin and Hobbes. If you're a fan of big like philosophy, I would say, I would recommend something fell. I would definitely recommend epic Marcus Aurelius first, but Stoicism in general, I think, is just a good, interesting philosophy that will actually help your life a lot, and maybe explore some other ones. Read The Stranger, all of that, and the Chinese one. And just for books, read Things Fall Apart, read Cuckoo's Nest. But really everything I read this year was worth it. So yeah.